Now to the raw politics of the Tea Party movement. On March 20th, near the end of the bitter health care debate, Representatives John Lewis, Andre Carson, and Emmanuel Cleaver say that some demonstrators, many of them Tea Party activists, yelled the N-word as the congressman walked from House office buildings to the Capitol. Conservative and Tea Party activists insist it never happened, and one of them has offered big money if anyone can prove it.
I offered $100,000 to anyone that can show video that the N-word was hurled once.
That was Andrew Breitbart, the conservative blogger who released the video of Acorn workers counseling actors posing as a pimp and a prostitute. He's pledged to donate $100,000 to the United Negro College Fund if anyone provides proof of the epithets. Joining us now with more on this and a lot of raw politics, CNN senior political analyst David Gergen, chief political correspondent, host of CNN State of the Union, Candy Crowley, host of John King USA, John King, CNN political contributor and Republican strategist Ed Rollins, and CNN political analyst Roland Martin. Roland, what about that? I mean, if this happened, you would think there'd be video by now. Does that, the fact that it's still being discussed, is that a win for the Tea Party?
No, I think it's dumb on the Tea Party's part to be focusing on this. I mean, if you are trying to create an actual movement, this is the last thing you want to continue talking about. You want to be talking about policy. You want to be getting folks involved. You don't want to be constantly reminding people at the possibility that the N-word was used, because all you're simply doing, having a self-fulfilling prophecy. I mean, it just makes no sense if you're trying to create an actual movement.
David Gergen, I don't know if you were listening into the discussion we were having before the break about Oklahoma and talking to the state senator. What do you make of that? I mean, earlier in the day, a lot of liberal groups were certainly raising red flags, saying, you know, Tea Party groups are wanting to you know, raise some sort of militia. The state senator made some comments that raised a lot of concern. Now he clearly seems to be saying he is not for some armed group of activists.
Well, I don't know if he laid it to rest or not, Anderson, but he certainly was suggesting there's more smoke here than fire. And until there's proof to the contrary, and there may be proof, I'd sort of take him on his word, at his word, and move on. I do want to disagree with Roland about the point about Tea Party and the question of Congressman John Lewis walking across that street. That was an important moment. The accusation that he had been called the N-word and spit upon was a searing moment during the health care debate. And many of us took it as sort of like that's what happened. Now, if it didn't happen, I think it's important to know that. Or if somebody was an imposter. Now we'll have to, maybe we'll never know. But I think and the Tea Parties have every right to sort of say, hey, wait a minute, or Andrew Breitbart, to say, wait a minute, if it didn't happen, let's get that clarified, because it did turn off an awful lot of Americans.
Well, first of all, I'm making that point because we've had the previous accusations of the kind of these crazy posters being there. I remember debating Mark Williams, one of the Tea Party leaders on Anderson's show, and I said, hey, if somebody had a racist sign, would you tell them to take it down? And he said, no, I don't want to infringe upon their First Amendment rights. The point I'm making is, if you are trying to get folks elected, you don't want to continue to coming back to that kind of story. You can try to disprove it all you want to, but the point is, you want people focusing on why you have a movement. You want them focusing on issues, not this, because if this is a conversation, that's the last thing you want, because you're never going to get people involved in your movement.
But John, I mean, this conversation is only going to continue. You also now have this liberal group called Crash the Party that says it's going to send people to the protest, to Tea Party protests, to try to blend in and basically do things as outrageous as they can to cast a bad light on the Tea Party activists.
And so you see yet another example of the fracture in our politics right now. And to the point both Roland and David, I think, would agree on, is the challenge for the Tea Party is, are you a protest movement or a political movement?
That's right.
And if you have people now trying to crash their party, if you will, then you see what's happening. You see that they have incited the left, which in an odd way is a good thing if it means political activism. It's a bad thing if it means political stunts. We're going to test this out. We're going to test this out through the primary season in a number of parts of the country, and then we will test it out come November. Is the Tea Party movement going to mature as a political movement? What happens if their preferred candidates lose in the primaries? Do they become Republicans and conservatives, which is where most of their energy, not all of it, but most of their energy is right now, or do they protest thinking they somehow got the short end of the stick? That is one of the many questions in this very volatile year where there are tensions on both the right and the left. It's not just on the right. There's tensions on the right and the left.
True. How
do these fractured pieces come together?
Candy, House Majority Leader Steny Hoyer said today that the Tea Party is already having an impact on Democratic chances this year. He said, do I think that negative atmosphere that's been created by the Tea Party and by others certainly goes into the thinking of members? I think it does. I think you honestly have to point out that it does. How much of a factor do you think they are for Democrats in swing districts and certainly in conservative districts?
Well, I mean, certainly at the polls, they're going to be a factor, and certainly in so far as they drive the debate. I mean, we have heard a couple of the people that have decided to leave and to retire say that the atmospherics are just so bad that it's not fun anymore. It's particularly not that much fun, actually, for Republicans because being in the minority is not that much fun. So there certainly is a kind of a heightened, hostile atmosphere here that no doubt weighs on the minds. If you're a congressman and you've been there for 20 years, this may not be that much fun or worth it to you anymore. I think he's probably just stating the obvious, but I think it is also true that a lot of these people have faced tough races before, and they certainly have survived, and it is in the Democrats' interest to look at the Tea Party and continue to frame the Tea Party and Republicans as sort of crazy people, because if they can put the Republican Party on the fringe and say, well, you know, this hostile atmosphere is so terrible, we're just leaving. If they can do that, it's helpful. So there are politics being played on both sides of this.
Ed, can they play a spoiler role in some of these races? There was this Quinnipiac poll that showed that in just a generic ballot, Republicans would come out ahead, but in races where there's a Tea Party candidate in the mix, it might affect things like it did in
First of all, historically, elections are about the incumbent, whether it's a Democrat or Republican. And if people aren't satisfied with the incumbent, they look for an alternative. In this election, most people aren't very happy with some of the Democrats, so they're looking to the Republican for an alternative. If there's a third ballot there that they can go to, and certainly this is the strategy of Harry Reid in Nevada. They've been talking about this for months and months, to get a Tea Party, to get a couple third candidates in there, so he doesn't have to win 50% of the vote in order to win. He can win a plurality. So anytime you get a group like this, and there's no organized leadership here, unlike the Perot movement, anything can happen. And there's no guarantees that these people won't be as mad at some Republicans. There's 6 months to go to this election, and they can turn on Republicans as quickly as they can. The decision they have made is they don't like what's going on in Washington, D.C., and they're going to do something about it.
I think this organizing point is critical. I mean, at the end of the day, you have to have some kind of centralized operation going, because if you're trying to create a movement, you have to move folks in a certain direction. You simply can't have all these different parts and people just calling themselves Tea Party activists if you don't have some kind of centralized way of doing it. The Reform Party was able to do that.
We're going to have more with their panel.